Our next question, more emphasis on the important biblical values of communion, baptism, church membership, and congressional decisions, i.e. deciding as a congregation who are the elders, deacons, etc. What will this look like?
This is an interesting question, and to answer it, I'm going to give you an answer that some of you may think is splitting hairs, but I don't think it's splitting hairs. I don't mean to be evasive here, but I think this will help you to understand what we've been working on and the perspective we came from. We, throughout our entire discussions, were very focused on the scope of work that we had been asked to do. In other words, we didn't get into figuring out the church's doctrine on end times theology. Okay, we didn't try to figure out whether we're supposed to be Calvinist or Arminian. We focused on what is the vision for this church, for this generation, and what are the things that we need to do in order to be responsible to steward that vision. And when we talk about vision in an organization like this, vision basically answers one question. And that question isn't what are we going to do, but the question is why are we doing it? Because there are so many things that happen in church that either are a very clear thing that comes from the Bible. The Bible says do this in church. Or B, there's something that comes from church history. There's a long tradition of it. We see benefits of operating in certain ways. And so a lot of the things mentioned here are they kind of fall under the category of sacraments and ceremonies and that sort of thing. And I don't mean to downplay the role of those in church life or whatever, but the work we were doing as a group was not focused on the what specifically are we going to do. The work was focused on the why. Why are we doing it? Why does communion matter? Why does baptism matter? Why does church membership matter? And we feel like the vision of saying we need to awaken God's purposes within us and reflect it to other people, if we really understand that vision statement, it provides the why for all the other things that happen as part of the church. So I'm not trying to sidestep the question and say, well, I'm not going to answer it. The reality is we didn't really jump into questions of sacraments and ceremonies. What we did do was come up with what we think is a very biblical why for what we're doing. And then the structure that we sort of put together is kind of a how for what we're doing. So we talked about the why and we talked about the how. And part of what has gone in place in that structure is this deal where the elders and the pastor are the overseers of the church. They're the primary caretakers of the vision and really keep us moving in the direction God is taking us. And then we have 3 team captains that are really focusing on the sort of day-to-day or week-to-week activities of making things happen in the church that need to happen in church life. And so while we haven't answered the questions about how often are we going to take communion, how are we going to handle a baptism, what about infant dedications, all those things, we haven't sat around and answered them. They weren't really part of our scope of work. But what we have done is recruited team captains whose responsibility it's going to be to work on answering those questions, the team captains along with the elders. So I say that so that you guys understand that there are going to be a lot of questions that you have. And it's great that you have those questions. And where in the past it may have been unclear, who is really responsible for this one area or this other area, or who do I talk to if I have a question about that, now you're going to have people to talk to. And those are the team captains. We're going to talk about the team captains a little bit more later on. But these are good questions, and we need to be asking them. And the good news is now you have people to ask and people who are going to take responsibility for figuring those things out and implementing them in church life.